Oh, hello again, and thank you for tuning into In Plain View. We are just a couple days away from the start of the 2019 NFL season. I couldn't be more excited. I'm crunching my numbers. I'm trying to get my 150 lineups ready. Before we start, everyone's talking about the large scale GPP, the slant, and I do understand why. It has a very fair payout structure. If you aren't Al Smiz and you're not putting in 50,000 every week to go ahead and compete in these large scale GPPs each week, I wouldn't recommend, and this is from somebody who plays pure GPPs. I still have not ever delved into cash, which is something that I do want to do eventually. But even from somebody who does GPPs 100% of the time, there are other ones out there, like the slant. Don't put the majority of your money in the Millie Maker. It's too top heavy. It really hurts your chances of having a positive EV. I really like the flea flicker. You will see that it's basically, aside from the micro tournaments, I forget what they're called, quarter jukebox maybe, or the mini max. That's what it is, the mini max, which is great if you're practicing and you want to try and get your chops up with your lineups and what you're doing and how you're optimizing. Those are great, but then, to get into the tier of the realer tournaments where you can win real money, there's the flea flicker. It's $5 an entry. You can max enter at 150, and it's got basically the same payout as the slant. You're not getting 2x minimum, but you're getting like 1x. All right, it's still at least at par with the other tournaments, but it also maintains that very fair payout structure. And it's got about a third of the people in the tournament that you're competing against. So I really like that. I'm always trying to get as close as possible to 1% of the total pool of entries with my lineups. I don't recall the exact numbers. I'm a little unorganized right now, but I just want to make sure I got this video out. I do think you're at least getting like 0.6%. Yes, 0.6% of the total tournament by max entering the flea flicker. So that tournament's going under the radar. I really like it. It's not going to have too many of the sharps in there because the number one prize is 10K. It's not the slant, so it's not 50K. It's not the Millie Maker. It's not a million. But hey, if you place first, that's 10K. So I would recommend that tournament if you have the budget and that's what you're trying to do in daily fantasy. Otherwise, if you still want to investigate GPPs, I would definitely recommend the mini max. You can get away with max entering a GPP tournament for $75. You really can't beat that. It's not chump change, but if you're really into DFS, that's a really great start. And that's relatively new. When I was getting into it, they didn't have those, and it was really hard to kind of dig in and try and do GPPs, what some consider a lottery lineup, in the most intelligent way possible and not treat it as a lottery. And to do that, I firmly believe, aside from single entry tournaments, that you need all 150 lineups. So with that, we can go ahead and begin. I have my 5 hot takes for NFL DFS Week 1 in Draftkings. Every take has added leverage associated with it. So if you are vibing with what I'm saying, just know that if you decide to do it in some of your lineups, you're going to have leverage against the field based on projections, based on current sentiment, and what have you. So the first thing I want to bring up, I know I've been talking about him quite a bit, but as I continue to do my analysis, I can't help but see Josh Allen here at 5,600. Okay? Now, we already know that he's one of the most polarizing players in the NFL, especially the quarterback position. People either love him, people either hate him. The people who hate him, I would think, stick more to looking at the college stats, to looking at the first-year stats when he got injured, when he was a rookie, when he had basically the worst offense in modern NFL history working with him. And then there's the people who have watched him and see what he's capable of. And I think he's going to be special. Most importantly, I think he's going to be very tournament important in week 1 against the Jets. He's at 5,600. He is the same price as Kyler Murray. We're going to get to Kyler Murray in a second, but this is a perfect pivot. You know all the hype with Kyler Murray, okay? So the leverage in here is that it's a perfect pivot. I can't imagine he's going to be highly owned, and that kind of shocks me because we've seen his ceiling. We saw it last year. How did they end week 17 of last year? It was against Miami, and he had a 40-point game. There aren't a lot of quarterbacks and a lot of offenses that are capable of a 40-point game, okay? This rookie that everyone thinks stinks, Josh Allen, did it. Lamar Jackson didn't even do it. Apparently he's going to do it this year. And you know what? I don't hate him in week 1 either. I guess we'll see. But I really like Josh Allen here. I think he's going to be extremely important to winning the tournament. I think he's going to put up a tremendous value. When I look at his percent chance of being, I try to stay away from projections as much as possible. And I know that sounds crazy, and it definitely serves to be difficult. But if I'm just looking at it purely from a probability standpoint, and I've looked historically, and I look at the last season, and I say, okay, what's the percent chance Josh Allen shows up in a tournament-winning lineup? And my current definition for my analysis of a tournament-winning lineup is the top 500 most perfect lineups of that week. Okay, so if I look at what's the percent chance of Josh Allen being in at least X amount of these 500 lineups, at least being in one, being in that mix, okay? And then incorporate that with what's the percent chance of a quarterback playing the Jets being in a tournament-winning lineup. He is sticking out at number 1 for me, okay? Honestly, it's two players. It's Josh Allen and it's Lamar Jackson. Strangely enough, the two rookies last year, quarterbacks that people had the least faith in, but Josh Allen is the guy in week 1. I firmly believe it based on my numbers, and based on everyone's current belief of the Bills, there's really some opportunity here to exploit. This is my first hot take out of the 5, and it's that Josh Allen is going to smash. The good thing about Josh Allen is, A, you can just leave him naked in your lineup because he has that rushing upside, like what Lamar Jackson is apparently going to be and what Cam Newton is. But if you look at his wide receiver core, you have John Brown at 4,300. We know he's great. He was on a Baltimore offense that isn't very productive, isn't very exciting, but we know John Brown can ball. He's a deep threat. He's going to be basically taking over with what Robert Foster was doing last year, and we saw what Robert Foster did. It was great. So we have John Brown at 4,300, who is a deep threat against a defense who is ranked 27th. And with that type of player, there's a good chance that he hits 100 receiving yards, which gives him that 3-point bonus. Despite his chance of hitting that 3-point bonus, I would also highly recommend Cole Beasley at 3,600. Just watch what he's doing during practices and that one preseason game, which I don't believe to be the case for the entire season. But, man, I know the coaches gave them a little freedom, Allen and Beasley, to kind of come up with their own strategy together, and they're running their own routes, and they're doing their own audibles, and that's great. But him at 3,600, he may not have 100, 150 yards, but I could very easily see 10 receptions. So with that being the case, at 3,600, he's also basically the best play, in my opinion, in his price tier. So the first hot take, Josh Allen is your quarterback. Naked, Beasley, or John Brown, it's all good, baby. Go heavy. That is what I firmly believe to be the case to be successful in week 1. My second hot take for week 1 if we're looking at all of the games on the main slate, and I made a video about this previously, and I was basically discussing heavy game stacks early on in the season. I'm toning that back a little, and I think it's because of the killer games that were put together last year with these teams. I mean, it was like Tampa Bay against New Orleans. It was all these super offenses with weak defenses against each other. That's not so much the case in week one here. But if there is one game that I would suggest is going to be viable for an ultra-heavy game stack, which in my opinion is 4 or more players, it's the Rams against the Panthers. So I've been doing some analysis. The Rams running back position really is standing out in this match. The Rams wide receivers are really standing out in this match. It has a good rank as far as the probability of being a game stack, with basically the success from either team against each other. And it's, I believe, a 52-point over-under, which is great. It's either the first or second highest against KC and Jacksonville. So I would really recommend this game if you want to take the heavy game stack approach. Something that I would maybe do. I know we're still a little weary of Cam with his foot, or it was his ankle. It was something he may be injured. It seems to be minor, and I know he's good to go for week one. So I would do something like Cam Newton. I'd stack him with a wide receiver. Let's go Curtis Samuel. I know there's been a lot of hype with Curtis Samuel, and the argument could be made with DJ Moore as well. But I tend to look at DJ Moore as more of a floor player, with Curtis Samuel more of having the higher probability of having a big game, kind of an outlier game. So I really like maybe this stack here, Cam with Curtis Samuel, and then I'll pair him with Todd Gurley, who is ranking very well, at least in my analysis, basically the best next to Chris Carson. And even if you looked at his red zone rushes last year, I mean, it was astronomical. It was basically like Alvin Kamara. I know he's arthritic, but he's still got some juice left in the tank. And then out of the wide receivers of the Rams, I would take Cooks, who is more of the deep threat. He tends to be the receiver that gets the more yards, which gives him a higher probability of the bonus. So if I was doing a heavy game stack in week one, which I will be, this is a good example of what it's going to be. It's going to be 4 or more players. I tend to stack Rams players, not necessarily utilizing Goff. I would much rather use Cam Newton in this situation. And I think this is a very good recipe for success in week one. My third hot take, and I know I'm going to piss some people off, but hey, fade Kyler Murray. Say it with me one more time. Together now. Fade Kyler Murray. But hold on, okay? I don't think he's going to be a total bust. I don't think he's going to be a disaster. When I look at large-scale GPP tournaments, one thing really pops out, and it's the fact that you don't necessarily need to have the highest scoring quarterback. There isn't a ton of variance within that position, which means if you don't have the top-ranked quarterback, that doesn't mean you're not going to win the Millie Maker or you're not going to win a tournament, okay? It basically was the case last year in week one with Fitzpatrick, but that was a freak situation where you had the cheapest, you had a quarterback at the cheapest possible price, and he put up 40 points, okay? That's a little different. That makes him a little more important. When I look at other quarterbacks that could maybe have a 40-point game, it's maybe Josh Allen. It's maybe Lamar Jackson. It's because of their rushing ability. It's maybe Jameis Winston because they're so pass-heavy. But it's not a rookie. It's not an overhyped rookie with one of the worst offensive lines in the NFL. I'm sorry. If I'm wrong, I'm going to lose a lot of money in week one. and I'll own it, but I'm fading Kyler Murray. And he's been so hyped. He's going to be one of the most owned quarterbacks. And he's a rookie. And his coach hasn't coached in the NFL before. And they have the worst offensive line. And their defense doesn't have all their starters. Man, I just don't get it. But you know what? I'm avoiding Kyler Murray in week 1. That is my third hot take. My fourth hot take. Don't shy away from Tyreek Hill. Okay? I know the reports are coming out, and he's being shadowed by Jalen Ramsey. But you know what? He's Tyreek Hill, and he's on the Kansas City Chiefs. He is a player that you can never with 100% certainty say he's going to be shut down. I know he's been shut down in the past. I guess when they play the Jaguars, I believe I saw that. But I basically looked at his price tier, and I basically went $1,000. I created $1,000 range relative to his price. So it's basically $7,100 to $8,100 is his particular price range here, being at $7,600. If I looked back to the 2018 season and I looked at the wide receivers that played against the Jaguars, now I don't know for certainty whether Jalen Ramsey was shadowing them. I would assume he was. But there's 2 wide receivers that stuck out in that price tier. There's only 2 that played the Jaguars. In week 11, it was Antonio Brown. He was at $7,800. And then in week 17, it was DeAndre Hopkins at $8,100. And you could say, hey, it was a division game. Where's the other DeAndre Hopkins? He wasn't in this price tier. So he only fits the mold the second time they played, and in week 17. So Antonio Brown, week 11, $7,800. DeAndre Hopkins, week 17, $8,100. Antonio Brown put up 25.7 points, and DeAndre Hopkins put up 29.7 points. Okay? And if you're going to ask me whether or not both of those receivers showed up in those respective weeks as far as being a perfect lineup or being tournament important, they both were. Okay? And this was against Jalen Ramsey. So that's just a point I wanted to make. It's the Kansas City Chiefs. Any particular player can really pop off, whether it's Kelsey, whether it's Hill, Damian Williams. But don't fade Tyreek Hill just because of this news, okay? It's been proven that very high-priced wide receivers can still put up points, okay? Jalen Ramsey is not God. I will be having some Tyreek Hill incorporated in my lineups, okay? My final 5th hot take. Have some Jimmy Garoppolo in your player pool. This game, the 49ers versus the Buccaneers, it's at a 50-point total now, which is great. It's in the top 3 for the week. I think it's a good leverage play because people saw the preseason. People know that he hasn't played a lot recently. I think he's going to be a fade. And he's also not the cheapest. He's not expensive, but he's at $5,800. There's other viable people below him. We have Garoppolo at $5,800. People are going to be on Wentz. People are going to be on Kyler Murray. Definitely people will be on Kirk Cousins. But Jimmy Garoppolo, A, this is going to be a high-scoring game. B, he has Kittle. C, he admitted that in preseason he was throwing more difficult passes. I mean, that could be bullshit, but I don't think he's lying. So he was challenging himself in preseason. Okay, he was doing things that he probably wouldn't normally do, and that's kind of what preseason's for. And D, it's just preseason. You can't look too much into it. Okay, with that being said, I know I recommended the Rams and the Panthers for an ultra-heavy game stack. But as far as this game, the 49ers and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, this is very viable for a game stack as well. I might not go 4-5 players, but Garoppolo, Kittle, answer it back with Evans, answer it back with Godwin, maybe a little Howard. Absolutely. That could definitely be successful. Oh, you know what? I left off at D. E, point E. Tampa Bay, even with has arguably the worst defense in the league. And we saw what any team that played against Tampa Bay could do. Basically, whatever they would score on average, increase that by a standard deviation if they were playing the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and then that was their score. So there's a lot of things pointing in the right direction here, and there's a lot of noise that leads me to believe that people won't be playing Garoppolo. All right, there's leverage. You need these different points of leverage to have any chance of getting up there on a large-scale GPP and getting that high-scoring lineup and winning all that dough. So thank you for listening. Those were my 5 hot takes for week 1. I'm out.